Hello. Work Well Now is the online professional development community run by me, Heather Worsfold, and my colleague Jennifer Morgan. This is a brief introduction to our upcoming pair of training programs, the Imposter Syndrome, Parts 1 and 2. You may well be asking why we are doing something that has in essence been done to death, and in 2 parts at that. Well, we've got 3 reasons. The first one is that training on the imposter syndrome lands best when, as you've probably guessed, we are in the throes of imposter syndrome. But with luck, we may only find ourselves in this space once or twice in a career. So if we don't get the training when we need it, it can have quite a short shelf life. So our training programs are always available to our community once recorded. So we wanted to put something on there that community members would be able to watch and hopefully learn from whenever they needed it. The second reason is that some imposter syndrome training talks only about how it affects the top performers who have unrealistic expectations of themselves. As coaches, we've seen that it can affect almost anyone at any point. It's not an exclusive issue, so we want to present it slightly differently. The third one is that some of the training covers a whole load about what you do when you find yourself in imposter syndrome, but it doesn't really talk a lot about the mechanisms that can drop us into that space. So we're going to cover that quite a lot in part 1, and then mainly in part 2 move to focusing more on what to do when we do it. So this is a little tongue-in-cheek. It's not a researched pie chart, I'll be honest, but this is our premise. By and large, we are all susceptible to imposter syndrome. The 1% of people who maybe never experience any self-doubt because they're completely happy-go-lucky and they never ever worry about succeeding or even really doing a good job, that's a very small number of people. We've coached people in some very different walks of life, and whether it's a CEO or the manager on a refuse collection round that takes great pride in their work, those are people, both of them, that are susceptible to the imposter syndrome. It's wrong to think that that's not possible. Then we're going to be running the 2 sessions with this split. Defining in the first one the imposter syndrome, understanding it in play and recognising it in ourselves, and if possible in others. It's a really great thing for managers to be able to tell if a member of the team is potentially occupying this space. So we're going to be really looking at those 3 things. As leaders of this community, Work Well Now, we like to lean quite hard into understanding the mechanisms in play, whether that's psychological, social, whatever in whatever we're facing. It's not everybody's go-to. I'll tell you now that Jen's a lot more action focused than I am. We balance ourselves out in that way, but we both believe very strongly that being able to examine what's going on rather than just simply experience it, it actually is another tool in the battle to stay well and thriving at work. And Work Well Now is all about staying well and thriving at work. So this is the simple definition of the imposter syndrome. It might seem a little over simple, but imposter syndrome is the feeling that we are somehow a fraud, and it's work focused, obviously, because of what we do. That's it, really. We lose confidence, we lose belief in our judgment, we lose belief in our ability to deliver, because something's nagging away that says you shouldn't be here, you shouldn't be trying to do this, you're the wrong person, you're going to get found out, whatever it might be. But then there's something a little bit more invidious about IS that makes it harder to deal with, which is that sometimes we get it because we're holding ourselves to unrealistic, unsustainable standards of competence. And sometimes, annoyingly, we experience it when we're kind of being perfectly realistic and we are working sustainably, but we fail to recognise or give weight to the reasons why we are falling short in our own eyes. So that means that it can really be very little to do with our performance at work, everything to do with how we look at it, but not because we are pretending to be some sort of superhuman, but just because there is a mismatch. So this is the sort of complexity that makes IS really sticky. What I mean by sticky is that people can experience it for quite a long time once it gets into the grip. But in a way, that complexity is the reason why it can be beaten back. We can examine it in different ways, and it's the inconsistencies that are inherent in IS, in imposter syndrome, that mean it can be examined and put back in its box. So that's what we're talking about, putting it back in its box. So just to give you a little flavour for what we'll be looking at, these are the 4 situations that we're going to be focusing on where imposter syndrome seems to thrive, shall we say. So there's the person that's always succeeded but who hits a bump in the road, and that includes people that are really quite a long way on in their career. Jen and I were both 50 this year. We've got friends who are experiencing this for the first time. It happens at all ages and stages. Then there's the person who believes their success to date has all been down to good luck, and their luck's finished, so they can't succeed. Then there's the person who changes their career path. They stumble in their new journey, and then they believe that their single shot for success belonged to their first career choice, and that has eluded them. And then there's the person who does really well, perhaps even in a way that's recognised by others, a promotion, a bonus, a particular piece of responsibility, but they think that they can never join the club that they are joining because it's not for the likes of them. So that's the 4 situations that we'll be focusing on. Then we're going to look at these types of people, and here we're leaning really heavily into the work of Dr. Valerie Young, and she is imposter syndrome expert. Now, she's really focusing on these people with, in her view, unrealistic expectations of themselves. We said obviously at the start we're not only looking at that because we think it can affect anybody, but these are still really useful personality types to examine. We're going to be looking at the person that sees themselves as the perfectionist, the person that has become an expert. Obviously you don't pop out the womb an expert, but has become an expert. The person who is the soloist, who's known for being the one that goes it alone. The natural genius, and that's actually a very ripe area for imposter syndrome. And then the superhuman, which is the person that gets to everything and does everything and helps everybody and whatever. These are still useful types to look at, even though it's not our overall message. And these are the things that really mean that this can hit anybody at any time. It's the stones that life throws in our path. So these can make people feel like frauds at any time. Personality traits overlap somewhat with the previous section, but there's more to discover. Trying to keep everything going through major life changes is a huge cause of imposter syndrome. Family dynamics and culture can be separate, they can overlap. What I'm talking about there is if you are somebody like me, very middle, British, we probably got told don't get too big for your boots as often as we got told your tea's ready. I mean, it got said a lot to me and I'm not alone. So that's really what we're talking about with family dynamics and culture. And then there is this enormous overlap with anxiety. When people work through anxiety, they're suffering anxiety overall as a medical, psychological complaint, psychiatric complaint, however you frame it. When people are working through that, it's almost inevitable that some IS won't be far behind. And so we're going to examine that as well. So here we are. I've said we're going to focus mainly on defining, understanding and recognising in this first section, but we're not going to just tackle because we know that some people will be joining our programme who are in the middle of imposter syndrome at the moment, and we don't want them to be going, great, that's great, fabulous, I've got to wait another 2 weeks to find out what to do. So we are going to have a brief tackle section at the end of the session, maybe for the last 10 minutes. We've got a great tool for anybody to use so that they can really define for themselves whether or not they have imposter syndrome at the moment, and we'll be looking at a few to-dos on top of that. So that's our upcoming programme. It's really our launch programme. We've got a taster programme out there on coping with global uncertainty, which is available on YouTube, but this is us launching our easy course learning site. So just a bit more, it's me, Heather Worsfold and Jennifer Morgan. I'm an organisational behaviour specialist and a coach, and Jen is a coach and a facilitator for some really quite shiny corporate names, and we have both worked quite a lot in HR. The whole point of this community is, yes, we are a learning community. We are going to be putting out a training session every 2 to 3 weeks. That's absolutely the nuts and bolts of it. But it's a bit more than that. So we add in quite a lot of the tools around it, some thought-provoking articles to help people to start thinking about what they do, what they want, what they need. But then also we find that quite often people say, oh, I had this great question after the training program. Yeah, but it came up, I thought of it 2 days later. Well, no problem there. If you join our community, you watch one of our training sessions, or hopefully by August actually participate in one of our training sessions, we're there as part of the community to answer your questions afterwards, so that you don't just have a program, drop it, run and do something else. You can actually have a conversation later on to help you to use what you've learned. So that's what the point of the community is. But this is our launch program. The site, it's going to be live this week, which is start of June. And we hope that people will join. It's a monthly fee of £12, and then you choose how you access the training after that. But let's go forward, and I hope you find the training useful. I hope you'll watch it and find it very, very useful. Thank you.